I'd like to spend a couple minutes today talking to you about Standard 3 from the Common Core. It's about key ideas and details, and I'm specifically thinking about the third grade standard that asks students to describe characters in a story and then explain how their actions contribute to a sequence of events over time. And I want to use this book today as an example. It's a newer book. It just got a Caldecott Award. It's called Extra Yarn, and it's just a wonderful illustrations, but it's also just a wonderful story, and it's a really good example of how character over time responds to different things that happen, and throughout the sequence of events you can kind of track how her actions are influencing what's happening in the story. I won't read the whole story to you, but I'll point out that the story is by Mac Barnett, and then John Klassen does the illustrations. If you've seen This Is Not My Hat, he did that book as well, and a couple others. So just wanted to point that out to you. Great authors and illustrators coming together all the time to make new literature, and I'd encourage you to take a look at some of these newer books if you haven't seen them. Once again, we're talking about how we can describe characters in a story and explain how their actions contribute to the sequence of events. So basically the book starts out with very little color. The story is about Annabelle, and she is the main character, she and her dog, and she is a knitter. She knits, and that is pretty much the main skill that's focused on of hers. So we could describe her as a knitter, we can describe her as a girl. We can also describe that she's a bit creative once she finds her yarn and makes something for herself, but when she realizes she has extra, ends up making a little sweater for her dog as well. The dog's name is Mars. So if I was describing Anna at this point, I would say creative. I would say she was a knitter. I'd say she was a girl and a dog owner. And her creativity carries on because as she interacts with different people, either they criticize or compliment her work, she ends up sharing her gifts with them. And so I would begin to say that actually Annabelle is a problem solver, and she's generous here as well. You can see that she's generous in sharing her yarn by making a sweater for this boy and his dog. And as she moves on, you can see she does it for many others in her life as well, too. So she's making that yarn go pretty far. It's extra yarn, but it's a lot of extra yarn. She does it for her family and for a couple other neighbors. She does it even for the town doctor. And then she makes sweaters for everyone except for Mr. Crabtree, who never really wears sweaters or even long pants, and who would stand in his shorts with the snow up to his knees. "No sweater for me," he says. So she makes Mr. Crabtree a hat, which I think is also creative problem solving. He didn't want a sweater, but she still has extra yarn. You can see now how we're doing the work of Standard 3 because we're causing students to kind of track how her actions, we're describing her and seeing how the actions lead to some more description and the sequence of events. Now you can see she's got so much extra yarn that she's not only made sweaters for animals, but she's also made a covering for the house and the mailbox and the birdhouse. And pretty soon, actually, she's made her entire town extremely colorful, which is opposite of the way it was in the beginning, and warm and cozy. She's still sharing that extra yarn and being generous. And news spread of this remarkable girl who never ran out of yarn, and people came to visit from around the world to see the sweaters and to shake her hand. So we could ask students here, now because of all these things that she did, she's getting a lot of attention. How could we describe her now? And maybe they would come up with a word like famous because she's known worldwide. One day, an archduke who was very fond of clothes sailed across the sea and demanded to see Annabelle. "Little girl," said the Archduke, "I'd like to buy that miraculous box of yarn." So now not only does he want something from her made of yarn, he actually wants the yarn. And so we could stop here and have a conversation. What do we know so far about Annabelle? If we described her based on the sequence of events, things that have happened, the actions she took, what do we know about her? And we could stop and pause and predict what would happen next. And I'm not going to ruin the story for you because it's interesting to see how the story plays out, and it's a great conversation to have with your students. But it's also a really simple way to track the actions of that character as a way of describing her and seeing how that adds to the sequence. That will solidify the sequence in the student's mind so that when they have to retell, not only just talking about the character, but retelling the entire story, they'll be clearer on the sequence because they can remember the actions that the character took. So once again, that was an example of Standard 3 work. I was thinking mostly about the third grade standard, and focusing in on those key details and ideas so that we can describe characters. I hope that helps you, and I hope you can try it either with the book Extra Yarn or with another book that you have. Happy teaching!